Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. This is Sebastian Fonseca. Before we get into the very loaded episode featuring the college football playoff recap, the NFL action, and recent news in the NBA, please like and subscribe to the channel. It makes a massive difference in the YouTube algorithm. And take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages as well. Links are in the description. On New Year's Eve, we had the college football playoff semifinals, and both matchups were very enticing and a lot closer than typically played out. Both matchups came down to the wire and were very entertaining. So the first matchup was between TCU and Michigan, and TCU was coming into this matchup as heavy underdogs. I mean, Michigan has beaten Ohio State en route to their Big Ten championship. They just had so much in their favor. They had Jim Harbaugh as their head coach, a very talented trenches unit of the offensive and defensive lines. JJ McCarthy has been a very steady quarterback, so I definitely believe that Michigan should have handled business quite comfortably. And TCU being a team in the Big 12, we know that these teams lack physicality compared to other conferences like the SEC or the Big 10. And they're kind of known to being these high-powered offenses that just don't have the adequacies to contend with those other big conferences. Now, TCU really set the tone early. Now, they had a goal line stand on Michigan's first possession. I thought Michigan got a little bit too cute trying to run a Philly special on this sequence where they have the best offensive line arguably in the entire nation, and they probably could have just handed off to one of their backs and get the job done there. In that sequence, that really came back to hurt them. But on the next possession for Michigan, immediately JJ McCarthy threw a really bad interception that was returned for a touchdown. And this set the tone and helped TCU race out to a 21-6 lead. Now, a big part of this was Michigan miscues. Now, I already talked about that goal line stand, that they got a little bit too cute, but they also had the pick six, a later pick six in the second half, and then in the first half, we had a really interesting sequence on the play that happened earlier where JJ McCarthy linked up with Roman Wilson, which was supposed to be a touchdown, at least what was called on the field. I myself thought it should have stood as a touchdown, but on replay, you can see that Roman Wilson was stopped about half yard short of the goal line, and then he was in turn ruled short of the goal line. Now, I think he completed the process of the catch and had possession in the end zone, so the play was still going on even though he touched down at the half-yard line. But the refs decided to go the other way, and then the next play was just totally catastrophic for Michigan. I mean, on first and goal at the half-yard line, you botch the handoff and then TCU recovers. That's just a devastating gut punch to that Michigan team that was already reeling at that point in time. In the second half, as I said, that pick six really helped TCU continue to be in front as they were up by as many as 19 points in the second half. And every time that Michigan made this somewhat of game, whether it was a one possession lead or even 3 points at the beginning of the fourth quarter, TCU's offense was able to counter and keep them at bay. Now, Michigan had one last gasp with about 52 seconds left, and on 4th and 10, another miscue, which was a bad snap, sent the play into total chaos, and unfortunately they didn't convert, so now TCU is moving on to the national championship game. The first Big 12 team to make it to the national championship game. This is great for this conference who's been doubted and counted out, and now this Cinderella run continues. Really disappointed with Michigan. They just seemed unprepared for this matchup. They can blame the long layoff between their last game to now, but Jim Harbaugh is better than that as a coach, and it seems like he could be on the way out as the NFL could be calling him up again. With Ohio State and Georgia, this was a really nice matchup. This is far more competitive than our recent 1-4 matchups that's been favoriting the top-seeded team in the college football playoff. Ohio State came out firing on all cylinders. I mean, they raced out to two different 14-point leads at two different junctures of the game. Really good game by CJ Stroud. I mean, he is a total dual threat quarterback and will be a very interesting prospect in the NFL. I really liked their game plan. Marvin Harrison was probably having a really nice game until he was unfortunately knocked out to a concussion in the second half. It definitely brings up some debate whether if he was able to carry on in the game, whether they would be able to move on. But we can't play woulda, coulda, shoulda. Got to give credit to Georgia, who ended up pulling out the victory. And their defense, who has shown vulnerabilities in this game. I mean, this is the highest season output in terms of points allowed throughout the entire season. So that's something to be concerned on, because TCU is a similar spread offense to Ohio State. So they can maybe utilize some of this game tape that they got from Ohio State and utilize that in their matchup next Monday. In the fourth quarter, we had a fourth quarter deficit of 14 points that Georgia was facing, and Stetson Bennett led the comeback, and they had a 1-point lead with about a minute to go. I was really impressed by his composure. I mean, the offense had opportunities to fail, but they had really good utilization of their wide receivers, who was phenomenal in this game. And their defense, who's been questionable, they were able to get key stops and get the offense the opportunity to score with time left on the clock for this comeback to even happen. Now, in that last sequence, we had Ohio State with about a 50-yard kick. That's not really easy even in the NFL, but especially for the college game, it's a really far kick for any kicker to make. It just never had its chance. It was shanked and it was pulled way off the target, and that means that Georgia is moving on to their second consecutive national championship game. Now, this defense can definitely be had. I mean, they were exploited routinely by this Ohio State offense, and this is something that TCU can really utilize in their matchup next Monday. But Georgia got lucky, and now we're going to see a really nice title game between TCU and Georgia next Monday. Now, moving on to the NFL, we had the New Orleans Saints traveling to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles, and this was Gardner Minshew's second start of the year, taking the place of the injured Jalen Hurts, who was close to coming back. He practiced this week, but they decided to hold him out as a precaution, and I think this is the decision that really hurt the Eagles. I mean, Minshew looked totally lost in this game. The offense was putrid for most of the first half. They didn't even have a single first down until the last seconds of the first half. This cannot be acceptable. I mean, the coach, Nick Sirianni, and offensive coordinator Sean Steichen have to do a better job of maximizing opportunities for their backup quarterback. I mean, Miles Sanders barely got any carries in this game, only 12 in the entire game. Their defense was questionable to start, but they definitely were able to clamp down as the game wore on. So this is when the offense would be able to pick up the slack, but they didn't. And I was really disappointed with how the game plan was utilized. And now this loss that the Eagles have suffered now opens the door for them losing out on home field advantage. And that's something that you really need in the playoffs, especially with there only being one bye round in this new playoff format. So they have one more opportunity to lock that up against the New York Giants next week. So we have to see. Hopefully Jalen will be back. I think he'll be playing and pressing to play, as the urgency is definitely there. But we've seen this Eagles team definitely has some vulnerabilities. I mean, their defense hasn't been able to lock down as efficiently as they used to do in other games. Now, last week we saw them get 40 points hung on them by the Dallas Cowboys. And now on the opening drive, it just seemed like Andy Dalton and even Taysom Hill were able to do what they wanted against this defense. I do think the pass rush was very good. They had their fifth consecutive game with 6 sacks. It's really impressive. They're leading the league in sacks. Hassan Reddick now has sacks 15 and 16 on the year. And also Brandon Graham, I mean, he set a career high in sacks with 11 on the year in age 34, coming off an Achilles injury. That's unheard of, so I have to definitely have some positivity for the Eagles there. But I'm still concerned. They're limping into the playoffs, where their teams like the 49ers are looking really good. I mean, I don't think the Niners have lost since early November. They've been through far more adversity than the Eagles, so we have to see what happens. But hopefully they can handle business on Sunday and lock up the top seed and get a first-round bye. In an AFC East battle, we had the Miami Dolphins taking on the New England Patriots, and this is the second matchup between these two teams, and this time it was in New England. In my previous episode, I talked about how Tua had some issues with the concussion protocol, and now this is his second concussion of the year, a second time being in concussion protocol. I think this is probably his third if we want to talk about the Bills game earlier this season. But he was out of this game, and Teddy Bridgewater was the starting quarterback. And he had to lead the game because he seemed like he broke a finger. So, his status is going to be questionable for their final Week 18 matchup. So it was up to the third stringer, Skylar Thompson. And he did a solid job, but he threw a pick six. this Miami offense is now under total flux. I mean, they're under one of the biggest collapses that we've seen in recent history. They started off the season 8-3. They're on a 5-game losing streak, and they need some help now to get into the postseason. So I don't think Teddy's going to be able to go, and I definitely do not want Tua to be risking his long-term health for one game and possibly a postseason run. So it might be up to Skylar Thompson to get the job done and save the Miami Dolphins season. Now, the thing that's going to help them out is that the Bills are going to be playing the Patriots, and the Patriots are right now ahead of the Miami Dolphins. So if they get a win against the New York Jets, and then if the Patriots lose to the Buffalo Bills, who have something to play for, they have to find a way to win home field advantage throughout the entire AFC playoffs. So Bills have something to play for, and that definitely helps out the Miami Dolphins, so they'd still have a decent shot to make the postseason. The Carolina Panthers taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is basically the NFC South championship. If the Panthers win this, they could have another chance to lock it up and seal their playoff berth there. But if the Bucs were able to win this, that means that they seal it outright, and that's really what happened. Tom Brady had a phenomenal game when they were down for most of this game. I mean, I was really impressed with Sam Darnold. The Panthers offense was really sound, but they collapsed in the fourth quarter, and this is when Tom Brady propelled the Bucs to their second consecutive division title. So they win this lackluster NFC South title. I don't know how deep a run they can make, but this is still Tom Brady, a very prideful Buccaneer team. So I know that they'll probably be playing the Dallas Cowboys, so I would definitely be favoring the Cowboys at this moment in time, but you can never count on a team led by Tom Brady. Speaking of Tom, now we know this has been a tumultuous year for him. He's had issues with his personal life, with the divorce, and then he's had issues with this Buccaneers team. I mean, it's been so up and down for most of the season, mostly down, and they're definitely underperforming due to issues with the offense, the coaching staff, the defense not performing up to standards. So with him being a free agent next spring, it bolds the question whether he'll leave Tampa Bay and find greener pastures somewhere else. Now, I think there are 3 candidates for teams that are definitely interested in looking to sign him. Now, we have the Vegas Raiders, who have Josh McDaniels as their head coach. That is a very well-known relationship dating back to their Patriots days. They definitely are looking to move off of Derek Carr, so I think Tom Brady would be a perfect replacement for him. Now, the problem is if you're moving into the AFC West, it's going to be a very interesting division with playing Russell Wilson, who's definitely not been the best, but hopefully he'll be looking better next season. Then you have Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes. So I don't think that was the best bet for Tom Brady. So the other option could be Miami. Miami has a talented offense with those 2 wide receivers, a really nice running back team, and a pretty decent defense. They could use some work. I think that's something that bodes well for them. But I think the biggest one and probably the most enticing one could be San Francisco. I mean, he grew up in the Bay Area. He's a 49ers fan. And it would be a nice story. I mean, him going back home for his last few years of his career, maybe even bringing them a championship that they've been looking for since 1994. We'll see what happens with that, but I mean, that would be the best thing for Tom Brady. I mean, you could plug him in. He has so many weapons. He doesn't have to be the guy to carry the team. He can just distribute the ball, which is what he's known to do. He would have Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and then that vaunted Niners defense helping him out. I think just in terms of what's best for Tom Brady, it would be nice to him to go to San Francisco, but it's probably best that he stays out of the AFC, but there could be other teams in the NFC that could swoop in and steal Tom Brady away from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, both conferences have their 7 spots wide open for that last wild card spot. And in the AFC, we have Pittsburgh needing some help, but they're still alive. And then currently slotted into the 7th seed is the New England Patriots, but they're going up against the Buffalo Bills next week. And then Miami is still very much in play for that 7th seed. Based on how things could go, I think the Bills definitely need to fight for a home field advantage, so they probably would be able to handle business against the Patriots. And then I think the way it could look down to could be the Miami Dolphins, I mean, if Teddy Bridgewater was there, I had more confidence. Or even if Tua was able to come back, I'm not too confident in their third string quarterback going up against that Jets secondary. Now, the Jets have been eliminated from postseason contention, but they're still a very prideful group, and I think they just want to end the season on a high note. So I think they're in for a tough matchup there. So that opens the door maybe for the Pittsburgh Steelers to swoop in and steal the 7th seed. We all know about Mike Tomlin, about how he doesn't coach a tanking team. He has never had a losing season, and this is the other bad part about this expanded season. Now, he can either have a winning season or a losing season, and I hope for his sake that they find a way to win against the Cleveland Browns. And they may not make the postseason, but him keeping that streak alive would be great. I mean, Kenny Pickett has really picked it up in this last few weeks, including a last-second win against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, this win is now the second consecutive last-second win. Very impressed by his development. And like I said before, the Steelers team, if they can just help Kenny Pickett grow as a quarterback in this league, they're going to be something dangerous to watch out for next season, as their defense is still a very vaunted unit with a fully healthy TJ Watt in there for the entire season is going to be a huge difference for that team. And then in the NFC, it's probably even more wild because we have 3 teams right now. The team at the top of that race right now for the 7th seed is the Seattle Seahawks. And despite them having hold of that right now and having a very favorable matchup against the LA Rams, they're actually not favored to get it, because the way the standings could shake out, unless the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers game ends in a tie, the Seattle Seahawks can't really get in due to conference record. So the Packers control their destiny in a win and in situation against Detroit. Detroit needs the Seattle Seahawks to lose, and then they have to beat the Green Bay Packers to get in. And that gets into the next part of the podcast with Minnesota taking on the Green Bay Packers. And this was a game that, again, in this topsy-turvy season for the Vikings, either they win by the slimmest of margins or they get blown out. And this was the latter of the scenarios. We're down 41-3 late in the fourth quarter. They got like 2 garbage time touchdowns. We can throw out the final score, but it was very one-sided. I mean, again, this is a dome team or an indoor team. Went out of the cold of Lambeau. They just played soft. Kirk Cousins again got exposed against a team like the Packers, against Aaron Rodgers. I just think that they are true pretenders in this, and now with this loss, they move down to the 3rd seed in the NFC playoff standings. So they don't have any shot of having home field advantage, and they'll probably end up playing the New York Giants. And they played them very tightly in their previous matchup in Minnesota. I think they can learn from that, and they can have a good shot to beat the Vikings in the postseason. For the overall scope of things, I mean, this Packers team, who I left for dead after Thanksgiving, I mean, after they lost to the Eagles, they were 4-8. I was calling for them to start Jordan Love and then seeing what they have, maybe utilizing him in a trade package, but they stuck to their guns and they were able to dig out 4 victories. They got a ton of help too. And now they, like I said, they controlled their own destiny against the Detroit Lions, who were definitely not a slouch. I mean, Detroit has been owned by Green Bay for years and years, and this is a slightly different Detroit team. I still favor the Packers going into that matchup, but this offense for Detroit has been unbelievable. Like I said, Jared Goff has been getting too much slack about his shortcomings in LA, and then he's gotten off to a pretty bad start in year 1 in Detroit, but this year he's been very good. And with him getting some adequate help, I mean, Jameson Williams has been this new dimension in this offense. I mean, this speed that he has to utilize has been so helpful for this team. I mean, they already had Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark is another solid receiver, and then they have their dual backs in Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift. This offense is loaded. They have really good offensive line. I wouldn't count out Detroit either playing spoiler or even upsetting the Packers to get into the postseason. But this team, led by Dan Campbell, has been phenomenal to watch. And I think they are definitely going to be the future of the NFC North moving forward. Now, talking about another matchup between the San Francisco 49ers and the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, Vegas came into this making a big switch. They decided to bench Derek Carr for the rest of the season. I think he's done in Vegas. I've been saying this for a long time, that they need to bench him or definitely look to trading him, and I think now they're trying to protect this asset that they have, make sure he doesn't get hurt. And I think he'll be looked as a trade target in the offseason. Hopefully they can get a third or a second round pick by a team that really needs a quarterback. I think the Jets could be in the market for that, absolutely. San Francisco really made this a lot harder than it had to be. Jarrett Stidham had a really solid game. I mean, had so much help thanks to Devontae Adams. I mean, he made a phenomenal catch to force, or at least set up the chance to force overtime late in the fourth quarter. I mean, that was one of the best catches I've seen all year. But still, their defense that was getting lit up for most of this game, in the Niners finally woke up in the overtime period. Nick Bosa altered a throw from Jarrett Stidham, and that led to an interception that set up pretty much a first and goal situation that sealed the game for the 49ers. And now they move up to the 2 seed. They're probably going to end up playing either the Packers, Seahawks, or Lions, a very favorable matchup. And if something goes wrong between the Eagles and Giants matchup, they could end up stealing home field advantage throughout the entire NFC playoffs. Imagine a team with their third string quarterback, their wide receiver number 1, missing decent amount of time. Even their left tackle, I mean, Trent Williams was in and out of the lineup. Nick Bosa was in and out of the lineup. They are missing Emmanuel Mosley, and still they persevered. And they are just right there to winning the top seed in the NFC. I think they'll finish number 2, but they're going to be a very dangerous team nonetheless. For my players of the week, I'm going to name Tom Brady. I mean, that performance that he had to clinch the division, seal the Bucs playoff berth, really impressed by them, especially coming back from a deficit. And then for my defensive players of the week, it's going to be a little bit all over the place. The Eagles' defensive line, again, they've just been so good. I mean, Fletcher Cox had a sack. Brandon Graham had 2 sacks. Hassan Reddick, Javon Hargrave. They're the first team to have 4 players of 10 plus sacks or more in the season. So I'm very impressed by the defensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles. And then also the Packers secondary. I mean, they had a really nice performance against the Minnesota Vikings, clamping down on Justin Jefferson, who only had 1 catch for 15 yards. And Jair Alexander, who came into that matchup talking a lot of smack, talking about how that week 1 matchup was a fluke. I don't know about a fluke. Justin Jefferson, still one of the best receivers in the league, if not the best. But he came up small. They utilized double teams. They made him a non-factor in this game. Jair Alexander really backed up the talk with the walk. He clamped down on Jefferson for most of the game, and then also the secondary had 3 interceptions. 1 was taken back to the house thanks to Darnell Savage. For my teams of the week, I'm going to name the Packers for that big victory, and now they're controlling their own destiny for the playoffs. And then I didn't talk about the Chargers, but they have been a sleeping giant in the recent weeks. I mean, that win against the Miami Dolphins really helped them out in their playoff chances, and now they've been compiling wins. They've been getting a nice steady dose of a rushing attack, helping out Justin Herbert. So also getting healthy at the right time, now finally getting back Joey Bosa and then Derwin James. Those are their 2 best defenders that they have, and then also Khalil Mack, who's been there throughout the entire season. If this team can maybe sneak in, if this team can get a nice matchup, they can really cause up a lot of noise for the Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs, or the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, this Chargers team is very dangerous. I hope they can make some noise in the AFC. And then finally with the NBA, I mean, I wanted to keep it brief, but had to give a big shout out to the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, they've been on an 11-game win streak. Really phenomenal play by them, particularly with Kyrie Irving. I mean, Kyrie has had a really nice comeback since that suspension. He's been phenomenal, especially in the month of December with the 50-40-90 season, averaging almost 28 points a game. He's been handling business across the board. And then also Kevin Durant. I mean, he's been so efficient. He's been having a career high season in terms of field goal percentage with 56% from the field. And then in December, almost averaging about 58% from the field. Easy money sniper is one of the best in the game, and he's continuing to do so. And now the Nets are the 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference. And on this 11-game win streak, it includes wins against the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Indiana Pacers, both teams very much in the playoff mix. So very impressed by the Nets. They'll be definitely an interesting team to watch, especially with added role players that have been also performing very well during this win streak. And then we saw a very historic week for Luka Doncic. I mean, he had the first ever 60-20-10 game. That means 60 points, 20 rebounds, and 10 assists. That was a very impressive performance, one of the best I've ever seen. His MVP stock is rising. His MVP stock is definitely rising. I still say that Tatum is the front runner. He's leading the NBA's best Boston Celtics overall, and he's also been having a good season. But Luka has been killing it the last week. In his last 5 games, 3 of them have been over 50 points, several triple-doubles, and I mean, this guy can do it all. I just hope that the Mavs get him some adequate help. Now, he can't have going into the postseason as his best wingman being Tim Hardaway Jr. and Christian Wood. That's just not acceptable. Mark Cuban is a very smart businessman, and he's got to find a way to help his GM out and get some adequate help to help Luka make a deep postseason run just like he did last season to the Western Conference Finals. But Luka's been phenomenal, and I think he's just going to continue to be this type of player that can just do a little bit of everything. And that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope to see you in the next episode. Until next time, stay safe.